Erev Tov Batay. Says the Shulchan Aruch, let's say a person, on Shabbat, he's in a hurry to go somewhere after Shabbat ends. Right away, when Shabbat ends, he has to go somewhere. Sometimes it happens, that a person, Motzi Shabbat, he has a flight, to go to Israel or something. Happens. So he's got to get out of here fast, Once Shabbat goes out, he cannot, right? He cannot be mitma'ameh, right? Be lazy. He's got to move and go, to the airport. So they tell you, right? It says the Shulchan Aruch, in a case like this, a person can pray, Arvit very early. So what does that mean? After Plaga Mincha, you can do Arvit. What's Plaga Mincha? 1 hour before Shkia, you can do Arvit. Motzi Shabbat. Can you imagine? He's not going to find a minyan. He has to pray by himself, Okay, right? Where is he going to find a minyan like that? There's no minyan. So what he's going to do is, let's say, right, now, I'll give you an example, right? Shkia today is like 5:30, whatever. So that means that he's going to do Arvit at 4:30. Can you imagine? Plaga Mincha. A little bit later. And then he's going to do Havdala, go home and do Havdala. How does he do Havdala? It's still Shabbat. How does he do Havdalah? It's still Shabbat. How does he do that? So says Shulchan Aruch, what you do is like this, You do Havdalah on a kos. Hamavil ben kodesh lechol. No nair. You cannot light the candle yet. Too early. Right? But you're allowed to make Havdalah on Shabbat.
Also besamim?
Huh? Besamim you can do, no problem, right? It's not going to hold you up, right? Besamim. But no nair, right? Nair is asur. So what are you going to do? Nair, you're going to skip. Then what you're going to do is, once Shabbat goes out, you can do the nair. Later, Borei, right? At the airport, whatever. Hopefully the dog won't attack you. Those dogs over there. Those security dogs. They won't attack you. So you can do like that. You can do it later. You can do in the car. When you're driving to the airport, make over there nair, right? Borei in the car. Whatever it is, right? You got to get to the airport on time. So what's going to be is, if you don't get there on time, you're going to miss the flight. Now, here's the thing, right? I don't have to tell you, right? When you go to international flight, how early you have to come there? 3 hours before the flight, you got to come. 3 hours, they tell you, right? The truth is, even 2 hours is okay. But I'll tell you one thing, right? If you come an hour before, they're not going to let you in. You know that, right? You ever see this before? They're going to say, we closed it already. The door is closed. I'm sorry. You came an hour before. They close it hour before. They close the flight, This is what happens. So you can't leave, 2 hours before the flight because, if there's traffic, it's going to take you an hour to get there. You know what I mean? And you're going to miss the flight. This happened to me actually one time, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, whatever it was. I was here. And I had to go back to Yerushalayim. I lived over there. So, I did Havdalah nice and slow, late. I waited, and this and that and everything. Arvit late, Havdalah late. And then we started running to the airport, and there was traffic and this and that. And by the time I got there, they told me, sorry, it's closed. Sorry. So we had to reschedule the flight at a different time. This is what happens, so... Sometimes you have no choice. That's why, if you have a flight like that or something to do, important, right? Let's say you have some business to do, whatever it is. Sometimes you need to do Arvit early. So this is what you got to do, what we just said.
Do you have to do Arvit?
Huh?
Do you have to do Arvit? If you, can I do Havdalah and Arvit, I'm going to do it in the airport?
Yeah, if you're gonna have time, but the thing is,
let's say you're gonna have time to do Arvit, but you want to do it on time after Tzedakah Chavim.
The thing is, that sometimes people don't have time. I'll tell you, when you get to the airport, you're rushing already, You're on the line. They're telling you, move over here, come over here, go over there, go over there. It distracts you, And sometimes you don't have the kavanah, to do prayers, You don't have you're a little bit nervous. I'm sorry, you want to say something?
No, when you sit to wait to the airport, the Arvit is 10, 15 minutes or 12 minutes. Sometimes the people say, who Jewish? We see the Jewish 10
Right, but the thing is, when they have Motzi Shabbat flight, which is, time is very, very strict. So, sometimes you just have to go straight on the plane. You know what I mean? When you get there,
All right? It's not makir that you need to do Arvit.
Well, the thing is, that this is what the Shulchan Aruch says to do, when you're in a hurry like that. Because, it depends, you don't know if you're going to have time later on to do Arvit and Havdala. You don't know.
But I understand.
You know what I
I
mean?
cannot do.
Yeah, so that's the thing, And what's the order? First we do Arvit and then Havdala, So what are you going to do? Switch it? Right? And do the first Havdala and then Arvit? That's not the way to do. You know what I mean? So it's not exactly the best solution, that solution. Okay, whatever, So that's the thing. So that's what the Shulchan Aruch tells you to do in a case like that. Maybe you can do later, if you get lucky. Sometimes you just miss the flight if you don't do this, So what's the reason why you're allowed to do this? What's the reason why? Because the truth is, that in a case of dachak, when there's emergency situation, pressing situation like this, where you have no choice, you're allowed to do Arvit early, just like we do, in the summer, we do Arvit early, right? We do Plag Mincha, right? Yeah, I'm sorry?
No, not on Shabbat. But on
I'm
Friday,
sorry?
yes.
Yeah, Erev Shabbat, we do Erev Shabbat, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it doesn't matter, it's all the same, Arvit is the same, every day. And we also do on Yom Chol, also Erev Shabbat, we do Arvit early, early. So Plag Mincha, when you're in a hurry, pressing situation, you're allowed to do Arvit early, Plag Mincha. That's the thing, And we, the Sfardim, our minhag is we do Arvit, Plag Mincha all summer. That's what we do. That's our minhag. Where is it brought down? Bit Yosef is brought down. Maran Rabbi, he writes in Yeb Yomer that when he was young, young scholar, young avrech, he used to go, because he had a night seder also to learn at night, in the kollel, whatever. So he couldn't go to Arvit late Arvit. I'm talking about Yom Chol. So what he would do is he would go to Musayov, and pray over there Arvit, Plag Mincha, early Arvit, and this way, right, then he could learn later without having to interrupt, right, to make any interruption, That's what he did. So Maran also did this, he used to pray Arvit early, just like we all the Sfardim, they do this. He said, right, that's minhag of Sfardim. Okay, so that's the way it's done, when it comes to, same thing, by the way, as we said, right? It says in the Gemara that Rab also, when he used to bring in Arvit, when he used to bring in Shabbat, also he did the same thing, did Arvit early, Plag Mincha. So you're allowed to do this, whether it's Erev Shabbat or Motzi Shabbat, right? You're allowed to do early Arvit if you need. Something like this, right? Okay, fine. Let's continue a little bit. So then, right, let's continue. The next thing is that we're going to talk about the mitzvah of Havdala, So it says in the Shulchan Aruch, as we mentioned already, that the minhag by the Sfardim, that we make Havdala in the shul. Right? That, just like we do here. It's written in the Shulchan Aruch, this. What's the reason why? Because the people who don't have, wine, or they don't know how to do Havdalah, we do it for them, that's the whole thing, right? So we do Havdalah for everybody in the shul. And that should be, always like that, that we should do Havdalah every time, every Shabbat, every Motzi Shabbat. We should do Havdalah in the shul. Because it's Mezaket Terabim, We already said, right, that to do Kiddush is not so good. You know what I mean? On Erev Shabbat, Leil Shabbat, in the shul, not so good. Better not to do this. It's a good thing that they canceled it over here. They bottled it, right?
What
They used to do Kiddush, in the old days. That's what they told me. Boris, right? Told me, right? So they cancel it. That's what they were kind of Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch says better to cancel it. It's better to bottle this,
in the morning.
So why the Havdalah we don't bottle it, and the Kiddush we do bottle it? Why? What's the difference? The Havdalah you don't need to do Kiddush min makom seudah. It doesn't have to be in the place of a seudah. So you do Havdalah, you don't need to do seudah over there. But Kiddush, it has to be in the place of the seudah, So you're doing Kiddush, there's no seudah, right? So then it's already, not really the best, the best thing.
Or morning they should do.
I'm sorry, what was that again?
You said in the evening, Friday evening.
Evening we don't do because of makom seudah, right? Same thing in the morning we don't do because we're not having a seudah in the shul. Unless you're having a seudah in the shul.
If you know that people are not going to do Kiddush. If you know that people are not going to do Kiddush.
You know what it is? We're not so concerned about that, Kiddush Rabbah, because it's only the Rabbanan, we're not really so concerned with it. So we're lenient about that. Because there's all kinds of halachic issues that come up, when you do kiddush in the shul. And you don't do seudah. Not really the proper thing to do. That's why Maran says, Shulchan Aruch, better to bottle this minhag. But if you're doing kiddush in the shul, in the morning, right? They're having food. That's something else. And you have to make kiddush, of course. I'm not talking about that. Right? But just to make kiddush for nobody, you're not having a seudah. And kiddush l'bamakom seudah. I'll tell you something interesting, right? Here's the thing. By the way, I saw this in one shul over here. I don't want to mention the names of anybody. But what they do is, in the morning, when they finish shachrit, right, before the musaf, the rabbi gets up, and makes kiddush, I tell him, I said, who are you making this for? Because the kahal, they're not yotzei dechovah. Why? Because they're not doing seudah, so they have to do kiddush again anyway, You're not yotzei dechovah when you don't have seudah. So what are you doing it for? What are you doing it for? For the malachim? You understand?
I think I know who it is.
That's what it is.
But they
Yeah,
said
it doesn't
because
matter.
they have candies and they don't want them to eat candies without kiddush, so they're doing it.
Listen to what he's saying, right? So truth is, let's get into this a little bit, right, since you mentioned it. If I do kiddush, right, let's say the rabbi, makes kiddush, right? Rabbi made kiddush, and then Yonatan eats candy, right? Yatzai dechovah, he's allowed to eat candy? The answer is no. Why? Because you're not yotzei de kiddush, because you didn't have seudah. Candy is not seudah. Understand? So you cannot have candy. Unless you drank a cup of wine, right? That's something else. But if you're just listening to the kiddush from the rabbi, and you're not drinking, you didn't have seudah, so you're not allowed to have candy.
But if I drink?
Huh?
If I drink wine?
If you drink, you're good, because the Geonim said, right, that drinking a cup of wine is like also seudah, because it's masbiyah. It satiates you, But if you don't do that, you didn't do kiddush. You have to make kiddush again. What's the point of it, right? That's why I tell him, don't do this because it misleads people. I tell this rabbi, don't make kiddush like that. Nobody does this, by the way. I tell him. He doesn't know. He doesn't understand. So then what they did was, he didn't stop making kiddush. They brought some cakes, and right, so they could have some cake, some mezonot. But that's not really, because not everybody eats the cake. Not everybody eats that. So maybe one or two people go up there and eat. So it's not really proper to do that, So that's the thing, So that's the difference between kiddush and havdala. When it comes to kiddush, it has to be in a place with a seudah. So that's why it's better not to make kiddush. But when it comes to havdala, you don't have to have a seudah with havdala. So therefore, right, you can make havdala is good, right? It's mitzvah, good mitzvah to make havdala. One more thing I tell you, we stop. Which is, what do you call it? If a person doesn't have wine for havdala, what do you do? Right? We spoke about this a little bit before. What do you do if you don't have wine?
Whiskey.
So you can make it on beer, on any alcoholic beverage, basically, liquor, whatever, right? Anything like that.
Whiskey. If it's expensive whiskey, you can do it.
One time I remember, I went to my friend's house a long time ago, 20 years ago, and he invited me, whatever. So I went there, and Shabbat went out, and he said, "Oh, it's just,
No wine.
I don't have any wine." So I looked in the fridge, I saw he has beer, Heineken, I said, "Oh yeah, you got beer."
Excellent.
Right? So I said, "Make the havdalah on the beer. What do you want?" Right?
The store is here. I can go to buy the.
It's better to go to the store, but sometimes people are too lazy, to go to the store. You know what I mean? Okay, they don't have time, whatever it is.
Wine?
So if you don't have, yeah, you can buy wine, sure. The liquor store over here, 99 is open right after Shabbat. So that's the rule, You're allowed to. So what do? You say, right? Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam she'akol niya bidbaro. Not that you don't make bar pia gefen, right? You're blessing on beer, she'akol, right? And then you make right hamavdil ben kadosh lechol. That's the way you do.
You're doing more nefashot, not Allah.
Exactly. That's the thing, So that's the way you do it. You don't have it. So what about if he doesn't have this or that? Right? Doesn't have liquor, doesn't have beer, doesn't have wine. So what do? So the truth is, that you're not allowed to eat, if you don't have. You're not allowed to eat before you do havdalah. So you have to wait till you get something, some beer, some wine, something, some liquor. Go to the neighbor, whatever. Make some phone calls, because otherwise you can't eat. So, right, Yonatan, we spoke about this, what about if a person, right, he knows he's not going to have also wine in the morning, he went somewhere, far away. There's no wine there, there's no store, there's no nothing, So what do you do in a case like that? So you know what you have to do, right? you have to do another Amidah with the if you missed the Havdala, right? If you missed the Havdala in the Amidah, you forgot it, right? You know, Atachonantanu, you got to do another one because you got to do something Havdala to eat. You know, so if you missed it, you gotta do Havdala right now. You know, do another Amidah. But if you already did, right? If you already did in the Amidah, you did Havdala Atachonantanu. So then, right, what do you do? If you know you're not going to have also in the morning any beer, wine, you can eat, you know, because they allowed, you know. They're not going to tell you to starve, you know, starve to death. You know what I mean? But if you know you're going to have in the morning, you should wait, you know, and because you're not really allowed to eat before Havdalah. That's the thing, you know. Baruch Adonai le'olam, amen ve'amen. Rabbi Chanan שאומר, אצל הקדוש ברוך הוא לא זכות ישראל, לפיכך קיבל להם תורה ומצוות שנאמר אדוני חפץ, למען צדקו יגדיל תורה וידיר.